What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the JERRY1 Podcasts. I'm your host, Nick Felice. This is another episode. This is episode 15 of the JERRY1 Podcast now. We've been going strong since the middle of July. Hard to believe it, but we have. Middle of July, some good times. Got 15 episodes in now. This is the 15th episode. Today is Wednesday, January 13th, 2021. You're watching this on Thursday, January 14th, 2021. We got a lot to talk about today, as we always do. Fantasy basketball, Kyle dominates again. How many times are we going to say that? Kyle dominates again, 800 plus points he scored. Kurt, another close game, but a different result. Kurt wins over Met this week. Larry finally beats Sam Shields in Jerry1 Fantasy Sports, so that's a big news. And Paul wins every single day against Jack JERRY1 Fantasy Basketball. We'll try to figure out how good is this Paul team and try to figure out what's wrong with this Jack team. And I mentioned a little bit last podcast, but this podcast, yes, JERRY1 Fantasy Hockey is starting actually right now as I'm looking over here on my other screen. There are some scores out there. No one is in the positives yet. It's still minuses right now. Those are goals right there if you know how the rules work. But fantasy hockey, it's going to be a big year. It's the fourth year of fantasy hockey now. And there's money on the line. There's $10 on the line. So winner gets 70. You make the finals, you get your money back, $10. Put some money on the line this year for fantasy hockey. The top two draft picks this year were both from Edmonton. Leon Draisaitl went 1 to Paul. Paul is first overall pick in the 4 years of that league. And number 2, Connor McDavid went to Josh Langley at number 2. So we'll talk about that. Nate's got a 10-game winning streak. JERRY1 Fantasy Hockey, most 10-game winning streak going right now. You got to remember, we talked about basketball, how they got cut short. Hockey as well got cut short in the semifinals with 4 days to go. Nate was the 1 seed. He won the regular season scoring championship. He had a 3-point lead on Justin Kiefer, while I had a 30-point lead on Paul. I was the 3 seed. Paul was a 2 seed. Justin Kiefer was the 4 seed. So we'll talk all about that at the end of the show, fantasy hockey, because today's show is going to go. This is the intro, as always. We're going to do a theme song next. And I'm going to talk a little fantasy basketball. And then our today's guest coming on the show, he's coming on for the second time. My good college friend, Larry Morris, is on the show. He's 3-0 for the first time in his JERRY1 career. So we're going to talk to Larry about his fantasy basketball team, and we'll see what his thoughts are. He's got a really good squad this year. He is a Houston Rockets fan. Some big Houston Rockets news today on James Harden. We'll talk to him why he passed up James Harden, and we'll talk maybe we'll get his thoughts on this big trade that just happened. So, with the Houston Rockets, I'm still not even sure what happened. But Larry Morris is on the show, and then we'll talk fantasy hockey at the end of the show. So that's episode 15 for you, and it's about to start right now. Larry's going to come on in a second, but first let's talk about fantasy basketball. Yeah, let's throw the standings up right there. It is 6:40 Wednesday, January 13th, coming at you. So, let me see if I get the schedule up. Yeah, and I do have the schedule. Okay, so we have the schedule here for week 4, but let's talk about week 3 real quick. Kurt was in another tight game with another person, and it would happen to be Matt this week. He lost because Stephen Curry in week 2 against Sam. Kurt does bounce back, and he gets a big win over the previous 2-0 Matt team. That's a big win for Kurt. He also scored top 3. Matt also scored top 3. And Kyle scored the most points in week 3 with 800. And what did he finish with? It's something crazy, 812 points. Yeah, usually league average is about 600, 700 points, especially with a 12-man league right now. 800 points Kyle scored, 812. Stat corrections come around on Saturday, so you never know. But 812 right now for Kyle, and first place scoring finish. And that was the same top 3 as it was in week 1 with Kyle, Kurt, Matt. This week it went Kyle. In week 3 it went Kyle, Kurt, Matt. Kurt happened to play Matt, and Matt got an unlucky week. Kyle beat up on Josh, who's now 0-3. Speaking of 0-3s, Jack, I mentioned it earlier. Jack did not win one single day in week 3 against Paul. I think it's just like kind of a, Jerry1 legend versus a Jerry1 up-and-comer and Jack. Just, manhandle him a little bit. Larry finally beat Sam. He was 0-6. 3 losses in fantasy baseball, 3 losses here in fantasy basketball. Larry finally gets the best of Sam. Sam's still got a good team. Never missed the playoffs. He's been the number 1 seed in both seasons. Sam's still a threat. You can't argue with that. Blake got a big one over me. My team's struggling. We don't even know where Victor Oladipo. I think he's on Houston. I'm not even 100% sure right now as we speak. My team is struggling. There's no doubt about that. We got to get healthy. We got to figure it out. We haven't missed the playoffs in fantasy basketball, so we're gonna try to figure it out. Blake, though, he was last in scoring. Jack's been last in scoring the last 2 weeks, but Blake was last in scoring week 1. But he's turned that team around, and that team's legit. That team, he was 10-6 last year, missed the playoffs. We've never seen a team 4 games over 500 miss the playoffs. Blake's team did that last year. He's got a good team. And of course, I haven't even mentioned the battle of the Justins. Justin's in week 3. Justin Hill edged out Justin Kiefer. He actually had to come back from 16 points down on Sunday to take down Justin Kiefer. So that was a nice win for Justin, his first win of the season. Justin Kiefer has also got 1 win in the year. He's lost a couple in a row. His first year in the league. He's trying to learn the league a little bit, trying to develop the game. That's week 3. After week 3, so it's a shortened season this year, 12 weeks. After week 3, that completes the first quarter of the regular season. Sam had only lost once in first quarters of the 3 years of the regular season of this league. It just happened against Larry in week 3 this year. So I'm now 10-1, I believe, in the regular season. Interesting stat. I love the stats. But I think the biggest takeaway is out of the first 3 weeks is that we could be looking at the 6 playoff teams that are in right now. Could be the 6 playoff teams we could see 9 weeks from now, because those 6 teams are legit. Kyle's the clear-cut favorite. Larry's good. We're going to talk to him in a second. Sam's always a threat. Kurt looks like he's got a good scoring team. Matt looks like he's got a good scoring team. And then Blake looks like he's got a good scoring team. So, you're looking at those 6 teams. That would be a good playoffs. Obviously, I want to be in there. Justin Hill wants to be in there. Paul Russo wants to be in there. Maybe Justin Kiefer wants to be in there. The 0-3s, though, is how we get into how I transition to week 4. 0-3 versus 0-3. I say that's a must-win game. I'll even go out on a limb. It's an elimination game. Yes, and it is Josh 0-3 versus Jack. That is a elimination game. You heard it from me first, and right now it is tough to watch. I'll say that. Jack is up 91-85 as we speak here at 6 on Wednesday. Hopefully they crack the 200 by the weekend. Those 2 teams got a lot of work to do. Jack, we mentioned Larry, how good he's been. We're going to talk to Larry in a second, but you mentioned how good Larry, you got to remember Jack and Larry were supposed to win the semifinals. They were both up in the semifinals last year in fantasy basketball, and then I got cut short. Larry has gone 3-0. Jack has gone to 0-3 with 2 last place scoring finishes. So different ways they've started their season this year. But I think some other big games to look out for. Obviously, that's an elimination game in my opinion, but some big games to look out for in week 4. Larry versus Kurt is a rematch of the first round that actually did finish in last year's playoffs. Larry beat Kurt. He upset him as a 6 seed, and Kurt was a 3 seed. Not really that surprising upset because Larry was second in scoring last regular season. So that was a good Larry team right there. Matt versus Kyle, the battle of the cousins. I wish Matt best of luck, but this Kyle team looks like he's going to be tough to beat. He needs to lose in the regular season, or he could go undefeated because when playoffs come, it's still 2 weeks. And man, is it going to be tough to beat this phone slaps team in a 2-week format. So, and that's why we play, and then of course he's got a good chance of the bye. And it's only going to be 2 chances to knock him out. That's what I'm looking at right now. Kyle's got a really good team. He does a great job. He had a great team last year, top scoring team in regular season last year. He didn't get the 1 seed. Sam got it, but Sam had a good team too. And Kyle looks like the favorite once again this season. It's amazing what he's done. He's only in his 2nd year in Jerry1. He's still a newbie, but he's definitely looking like this is his league to win it this year. Another matchup, Sam versus Justin K. I think Justin Keeper. Sam could use this win. You don't want to fall 2 in a row. You don't want to drop 2 in a row if you're Sam. Justin Kiefer needs this win. You don't want to drop 3 in a row, especially as a newbie in a shortened season. I think a loss this week for Justin Kiefer could really hurt his chances if he wants to make a statement this year. A win over Sam, who's been the 1 seed the last 2 years, that would be a huge statement. Right now, while I speak, Sam's got a pretty good lead, 159-71. We'll see if Justin can do something there. Maybe keep it close by going into the weekend. Do something there. Justin Hill versus me. Now, that is a JERRY1 classic. There's no playoff history with us. Never met in a JERRY1 Fantasy Sport playoff. Hard to believe. We've been here since 2011, me and Justin, back in 2011 Fantasy Football. Never met in the playoffs, but our regular season is very, very tight. So we'll see how that goes. And, of course, the last matchup in week 4 is Paul versus Blake. Blake's won 2 in a row. Paul won last week. Paul's the inaugural champion. He's a legend, and he's gonna be tough to beat. But Blake, on the other hand, he wants to beat Paul. He wants to beat Paul, and I think this is a huge game for Blake. He's been playing well. Right now, he's got a 213-184 lead on Paul. Blake wants to beat Paul. He wants to be Paul, I want to say. And I think if he gets a win over this is definitely going to help his chances. I think this is a playoff team right here. I really do believe that. I think the Orlando Schooners are going to bounce back this year, and they're going to make the playoffs. So I want to say there's a chance for me and my other 5 fellow teams that are outside the playoffs right now, but I don't know. I think we're looking at the 6 teams right now. I'm not sure who's going to get the 2 byes, but I think right now we're looking at the 6 teams in the playoffs. They could be in the playoffs by the end of the season. So, yeah, that's week 3 recap, week 4 preview of fantasy basketball. And now we're going to go to our conversation with Larry. We're going to talk a little bit more fantasy basketball. We're going to talk about fantasy hockey after our conversation with Larry. But here is that conversation with today's guest is on for a second time on the JERRY1 pod. He is currently 3-0 in JERRY1 Fantasy Basketball as we speak. His first ever 3-0 start in the JERRY1 world. And our today's guest is my good friend, college friend, Larry Morris. Larry, how's it going?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Nick?
Not bad. Every time you come on this show, something bad happens with your Houston Rockets. Last time you were
I know, right?
last time you were on, you're just coming off a loss in the playoffs, and now you just lost James Harden. How's that feel?
I know. I was gonna say thanks for having me on. I enjoy being on the show, but I mean, first that loss and the bubble, and now James Harden's gone. I don't know if I can keep doing this anymore.
It's just like we can't get you in the right mental mindset. It's always
Right.
something going wrong with your Rockets every time you come out here. But you know, your fantasy basketball team, like I said, you're off to your first ever 3-0 start. You were one of the 4 semifinalists from last year that the season got cut short. I compare you to my cousin Jack's team because you guys were both winning in those semifinals last year, but you have taken a higher step here. You're 3-0 while Jack is now 0-3. You guys are going different directions after
Yeah.
you were both right there. You finally beat my brother's college friend Sam Shields and Jerry1 Fantasy Sports after 6 straight losses to him. And to go back to last year, you were up 61 points in that semifinals over my other cousins and my cousin Jack's cousin, all the family. But Kyle Murphy, you were up 61 points over him in the semifinals last year. And now it seems like his team's even gotten better this year. And he's another one of the favorites, just like you. Believe it or not, you're one of the favorites to win it this year. I mean, you're one of the favorites last year. But first of all, and you're on a 5-game winning streak. You're got a red hot team right now. First of all, Larry, what are your thoughts on your 3-0 start team this year?
First of all, I say let's not jinx it. Knock on wood. But first 3-0 start that I've had in Jerry1 at total, I haven't been 3-1 on a 5-0 streak going back to last season. I can't believe that it's happening. I just got to keep working hard. I mean, I got a hard matchup this week playing Paul's Granny Panties.
Yep.
I know going into tonight, before we're of course recording this on a Wednesday night, but I am down currently, but hoping to have a comeback coming into the weekend, and let's move on to a 4-0.
Yes, it is a Paul Granny Fanny's team that you played Kurt, who runs that team, in the playoffs last year, a round that actually did finish. You did get your first playoff win there, and you beat Kurt. So this is a rematch of that first round last year. So you liking your chances, is what you're saying. You like your chances to get to 4-0 this week.
I mean, I'm happy. I mean, my biggest goal was, last week moving to 3-0. I mean, you said it before, my first time ever beating Sam and Jerry1 for basketball, baseball, all of it. I mean, that was I haven't ever beat him before. That was the one game that I was focused on that I have to get a win. Now just moving on to this week and keep going from there.
Yeah, especially it's a shortened season and it's still a 12-man league this year. You only play everyone once. And so unless you meet him in the playoffs, that would have been your only shot at Sam. But let's talk about 3 weeks prior, the draft. You had the 5th overall pick. Your boy, James Harden, not your boy anymore. But he was there at 7, but you decided to go with actually Sam's guy, who he loved, Damian Lillard, had the last couple of years. You went with Damian Lillard, double MVP at 5th. What was your decision taking him there?
I mean, if you can't beat him, join him.
Yeah.
But like I said before, Sam's been the one person that I haven't been able to beat the 2 prior years that I've been in Jerry1 Fantasy Basketball. He's had him both times. He's been, one of the top teams in our league every single year. And that was my one focus. And then, like you said before, about my maybe not so boy, James Harden anymore. There was just too many questions going on when we drafted on Sunday. And at that point, he just showed up at practice and he's been out partying in Atlanta with little baby and out in Las Vegas, and he's gained some weight. And it just felt like too much of a risk at the time. And I was, like you said, I was focusing on finally getting that win on Sam. And like I said, if you can't beat him, join him.
Yes, James Harden is definitely a question mark, but not as big of a question mark right now as Josh's Kyrie Irving, though.
I know. Everyone's talking now. I keep seeing with this trade going on today, they got the new big 3: Kyrie, KD, and Harden. Where's Kyrie at? They don't even know where he's at. But I would like to point one thing out. With the big trade today, I couldn't. It was surprising to me. It was probably needed. Just it was a sore in the locker room. Last night, Tuesday night, after the loss to the Lakers, it was James Harden said himself, "This team sucks." John Wall said, chemistry has not been good between the two of them. It was a big issue, but to point out, I know you said in the article week 1, my maybe not so boy James Harden. I just like to point out that even if he's not a Rocket anymore, James Harden, he's still my boy.
Yeah. Yeah, he had some really good successful years with your Houston Rockets, but it's
Just never could
weird.
get past the Western Conference.
Yeah, it's a tough conference, but it's weird because on my team I had 3 Indiana Pacers, which right now my team's a lot of question marks. I just did not after that draft. I was just not happy the way I drafted. It was like I got missed out on a couple guys who got picked right in front of me. One that comes to mind was I forget who took him, but Andre Drummond was one I really wanted him. I didn't get him. He's a fantasy stud. And then I got these 3 NA Pacers, and now that Oladipo is a Houston Rocket, and I had 2 Houston Rockets, so now I have 3 Houston Rockets on my team. And you told me before the show here that if the Rockets don't win, I don't win. And
yeah, you better hope our season turns around.
yeah, but one guy who has kind of done pretty well this year, and he's been on your team, and he actually helped you really big time in your win over Sam, is Bradley Beal, who had a 60-point NBA point performance, 52 fantasy points he had last Wednesday for you. What are your thoughts on Bradley so far?
Oh yeah, I've been. Isn't my first fantasy team I've had Bradley Beal before, but definitely this season's been great asset to have on the team with 29th overall pick. Out of my whole team, he's been the biggest producer. Like he said, he had that 60-point game last week against Sam. That was definitely a huge help in getting that win. But like I said, he's averaging the most points on my team. Couldn't be happier with the results that I've gotten from him.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you if this is what's been most successful for your team. I noticed that you did put Jaylen Brown on the IR today, right? Is that correct?
It was earlier in the week.
Earlier in the week, but I saw.
Maybe it was today. You're right. Correct. I'm sorry.
I don't remember when I checked. It was a couple of days ago. I checked and I saw you had been the only owner who had not put a guy on the IR this year in this whole COVID year. And Jaylen Brown's got COVID now.
I know.
Has that been, you think, been pretty successful for your team since you have not had too many injuries, I guess?
I mean, it's just been tough this year with the COVID as a whole. I mean, there's been games canceled just this week, and this is the first week we've had. We don't even know what's going to come the rest of this week, next week, and so on. But I feel like the COVID has been the biggest thing. I know. I did just put Jaylen on IR today, but I mean, the Celtics, they haven't played all week, and he's been one of my, he was one pick that I was real happy to try to get. He was one I was aiming for, and he's been a good producer for me, but with all these games getting postponed, there's not a whole lot you can do.
Yeah, and you've seen it. You've seen it in fantasy baseball, in the Kuka League, fantasy football. Is games on Wednesday for football, and then games. Teams getting buys pushed. So it's just been crazy, especially on the fantasy side of things. And especially in these weekly, daily ones, because they'll just move games to other weeks. Football, they try to get in the same week for you. But in these sports like baseball and basketball, they push them to another week, and that could really hurt you for a couple points.
Oh, yeah.
So you've been to the playoffs both years in basketball. You never missed. The highest seed you got, though, was a 5 seed. And this playoff format is similar to last year's, but just one last extra playoff team. It's 6 teams make it. 2 teams get the bye. Right now, you're the 2 seed in place for the bye. What is it going to take for this team to get a bye?
I mean, first of all, it's playoff or bust this year. I made the playoffs last 2 years. With the way last season ended, I mean, I have to make it back to the playoffs, and it can't just be a one and done. I've got to try and make a push for it. So having two buys or 2 teams on a bye is definitely going to be something I got to aim for to move me into a position to try and get the championship. I just got to take it 1 week at a time. Currently 3-0. Like I said before, I've got a tough week against Paul's Granny Panties this week, and just got to take it one every day at a time, because when it comes to fan, I mean, it's not a short time thing. It's every single day. You got to make sure you have the lineup, and who's hurt, who's not hurt, who's got COVID, what games postponed. You just got to everything's constantly changing.
Yeah, especially this time, these times, it's definitely a lot more research, especially with the
Oh
COVID,
yeah.
and keep staying on track, everything. One person I'll give a shout out to is Blake Crawford. Blake, and he
Mhm.
messages me all the time about how who's on COVID, and he's always like he's a big researcher, which a lot of you guys are. I'm sure you are too. Big research every day, putting so much effort into fantasy to make sure that you got the team ready to win a championship, and that's what it takes.
Mhm.
That's what it takes. But it's a 12-week shortened regular season this year. What kind of record do you think you would take in 12 weeks for you to get a bye? What would you aim for?
In 12 weeks to get a bye. I'm currently 3-0.
Yep.
So I got 9 games left. I mean, I would definitely like to win out of them 9 games, at least, six of them or so. Put me at 9-3.
That's what I
I
would
feel like
say too.
that'd be a solid at least 9-3, especially this. I mean, it's a tough league.
I think 9-3 definitely could get you a bye. I think that's what I think the 2 seed will be. Obviously, I think I remember looking at. If we look real quick here, yeah, you play. You don't play my cousin Kyle until week 10. So, and that could be a huge game. Right now, he's looking like he's unstoppable. Like 800 points. I could even imagine my team scoring 800 points right now. The way we're
correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't he like this last year too? About this time, I remember last year around the winter time or so, he was just he couldn't stop him. He was just putting up so much points every week.
You couldn't, yeah. And a lot of people forget, but I don't forget because I'm in charge of stats. But you were second in scoring last year's regular season, despite a 6 seed you had. You were still a really good regular season scorer and just didn't have enough luck to get a higher seed. But there was really no surprise that you won in the first round. And there was no surprise that you were even beating Kyle before it all got canceled, which would have been a huge win. But it's a tight league. But fantasy baseball, yes, fantasy baseball happened. It was so short, I rarely even remember it. But you played that. You didn't make even the constellation tournament. You finished in 10th place, 2-5 after 7 weeks. It was a really short season. Yeah, just real quick, what were your thoughts on that second season in baseball?
I mean, first it was so short. I was a 7 game season, and I think we were halfway through when you said something about halfway through we're in the last quarter of the season, and I'm like, what do you mean we just started? I'm still building over here. I'm still trying to put some wins together, but it was a pretty disappointing season. Going 2-5, but looking back at it, I was going back looking at all the different scores and stuff, and it was a lot of close games. It wasn't like my team was terrible. I just couldn't. I mean, there was some like 10-point, 20-point, 30-point games, and then of course there was a couple blowouts. But just got to do better next year and try to, get them 10, 20, 30 points to get the wins, and hopefully we can have a full season.
Yeah, not sure when it's coming back, but you did play one full season the year before in 2019. I know you did not a lot to build off from last year, but what's something you can improve more in fantasy baseball? Like going for pitchers, maybe going for a better lineup. I don't know. What's something to help your team improve?
I mean, I was happy with my lineup that I had. I mean, I had some solid. I could definitely use some better pitchers. I had Darvish. He was great. Could have probably used a little bit more depth with the pitcher. When it coming to just regular positional players, I mean, I was pretty happy with my lineup. I had Abreu and a bunch of other players who were putting up some pretty good numbers, but I was just getting hurt by injuries constantly, and it was just a tough season.
Yep, and we'll be back. Fantasy baseball will be back, but it's all basketball right now. But it comes to that point of the time of the show. Anybody who comes on my show for a second time plays my new game. It's called JERRY1 True or False. I told you the rules. I texted you the rules a little bit, but I'll just restate them here. So there's 5 statements that I'll say about your 2 fantasy teams in baseball and basketball. And I'll say the statement first, and then you decide. You start with 100 points. Most you can get up to is 3,200 points. The record right now is 1. 1 point. People kept gambling it all at the end there and losing. But I'll say the statement. Then you say how much you want to wager. And then you say true or false. You give your answer, and if you get it right, you get the points. If you get it wrong, you go down. So, and if you ever get to 0 during the middle of the game, the next question will be worth 1. So wager wisely. And yeah, are you ready to play, Larry?
Let's do it.
All right. So it goes from easier to harder still. Statement 1. You have 100 points. Has Larry played fantasy hockey? True or false?
I'd like to wager 100 points, please. I'm going to go with false.
And that is correct. Yes. Fantasy hockey
Top of the board.
has not been Larry's thing. Any interest at all?
I'll play anything.
Really? Okay. Well, maybe next year. It's a really short season, so I didn't even think about expansion really.
Mm-hmm. No, I'll play any fantasy sport.
All right.
I'll figure it out.
Next year we'll get you in. All right. So you're up to 200 points. Statement number 2. Larry has been 4-0 in any Jerry1 Fantasy Sport. True or false?
I'd like to wager 200 points for false.
And that is correct. And that is another right answer. So you were up to 400 points. All right. All right. Those easy ones are done. Here we go. Statement 3. You're up to 400 points. Larry, this is Jerry1 Fantasy Baseball. Larry has double-digit career wins in Jerry1 Fantasy Baseball. True or false?
I have 400 points.
Yep.
I'm going to wager all 400 for false.
And that is correct. Yes, you were up to 800 points. Now you are 9-16 overall, a record that we are looking to improve next summer.
That's right.
Summer. Yes. Okay. Statement 4. Only 2 ones left. You're up to 800 points. You got a perfect score. Okay. This next one is fantasy basketball playoffs and regular season. Larry has 14 career losses in fantasy basketball. True or false?
I'll wager all 800 points for true.
And that is correct again. Yes. You do have 14 career wins. That is or 14 career losses. 23 and 14, 22 and 13 in the regular season, 1-1 in the playoffs. 1,600 points you have. 1,600 points. Yep. So you go up to 3,200 if you wager it all here. Statement number 5, last question, 1,600 points. And the question is, in both fantasy basketball and baseball, the final week of the regular season, in both of those, in all 4 of those seasons that you played in, you are 3-1 in that final week of the regular season in those 4 seasons.
I'm not. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna wait. I'll wager. I'll do half my points. We'll do 800.
100.
And I'm gonna say false.
I'm sorry, Larry. It is true.
I'm 3-1, man. I doubted myself.
Yeah, you are 3-1. That's tough to see, but yeah, 3-1. You were 2-0 in the fantasy basketball last week of the regular season, which has been week 16 both times. Baseball was week 18 your first year, and then week 7 was your 1 loss this last year. So that was the only time. So keep that in mind. You've always been good that last week of the regular season. So, but you will finish with 800 points, which is the top score by 799 points. And you know what? That might stand for a while. The way people have been playing this game, we'll see. But yeah, before I get you out of here, forgot to mention this at the beginning of the show. Where are you coming from right now?
I'm still down here in South Carolina. I've been here for a little over a year now.
Nice. And one last thing on fantasy basketball. You've been in the league this 3rd year now. It's probably the tightest this league has ever been. Who is the biggest threat to you to win the championship this year, you think?
That's a tough question. It's hard to pick just one biggest threat. I know earlier in the show we talked a lot about Sam. He's always a threat for me. Then of course Phil's team. He's always like we talked about. He's putting up huge numbers right now. It's looking like he might be impossible to beat. And even you, Nick. I mean, I'm 1-4 against you all time in Jerry One. You're always one of my biggest competitions that I got.
Yeah, especially those two leagues. If you play me in football, if you ever played me in, I know I've actually, it's weird because Tuca Fantasy Football, I do pretty well in that too, other than 1 year. But in Jerry1 Fantasy Football, I had just struggled for years and years because that league had been around for so long. 2011 started, and this year I made the finals this year in fantasy football. I was actually in finals in like every single one of my leagues. It was going nuts, but I had not made a Jerry1 Fantasy Football playoffs since 2014 when I was a sophomore in college. So it was a long playoff drought. But in these other leagues, especially the ones you're in, basketball, baseball, and Kuka football, I do pretty well. So maybe I'm just starting to turn around, but I appreciate that. I don't know about this fantasy basketball team I had this year. I'm not high on it, but it's still early.
It's still early. You never know.
Yeah, I've already got. I do have to play Kyle again. But
And just watch John Wall, Victor Oladipo, and DeMarcus. They're going to go off for you. All three of them are. You're going to have a great team.
I hope so. That's a Houston Rocket fan telling me that. But Larry, I wish the best of luck for your rest of the season. Not sure when we'll get you on again, but I appreciate you coming on right now, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me again.
It was good to talk to Larry. Good to catch up with him. Yeah, and I wish the best of luck for his team going forward. 3-0, that's a great start for him, and the best start he's ever had in Jerry1 Fantasy Sports. So hats off to Larry for a good start. But let's talk a little bit about fantasy hockey. We just had our draft on Sunday. I put together that whole draft in 1 week. Didn't know if we were going to have a draft, but we're going with the same scoring system. We talked to Justin Kiefer on episode, I believe, it was episode 12 of the Jerry1 podcast. I talked to Justin Kiefer about maybe going to categories, but a league vote decided in favor of keeping it points, as you see in traditional other Jerry1 leagues. Fantasy hockey is a little more slower scoring. Fantasy basketball, you get up in the 600, 700 points with its scoring. Fantasy baseball is up to about 300 points in scoring for the week. Fantasy football, it's only like 3 days, three days, but it gets up to about 100 points. Fantasy hockey, 7 days, but for the week, it gets up to about 100 points as well. You can go off 200's a very good week. That's like historically, that is a historic week. We've seen a handful of teams score around 200 points. The only person to actually score 200 points was Q back in week 11 of the 2018-2019 season against Paul. It was against Paul, week 11. And he scored 210 points, which is a historic week. We've seen people who have been on pace for 200. And, when a week that's like Thanksgiving, opening week that got shortened. We've seen teams on pace for 200. But Q was the only one to score exactly 200, and that was when Q went on to win the regular season scoring championship that year, first and only in Jerry1 Fantasy Sports. But let's talk about week 1. Let's talk about the draft, I guess. Let's pull up the draft right here. But week 1 is Q versus Justin Kiefer is the matchup. Justin Kiefer, second year in the league. And then Q, he's been in since the beginning. Only Justin Kiefer and Jack have not been in since the beginning, but Q, like I said, he regular season scoring championship just the 2 seasons ago. Justin Kiefer, was so close to beating Nate in the semifinals last year, only 3 points back before he got cut short. So this is an interesting matchup. Just that I'm starting here talking about. I think it could go either way. I mean, week 1's so hard to predict because you don't know who's good and bad. But, because everyone's got a good team from the start. I mean, the way you draft and stuff. But, I think these two teams could go either way, you could look at Q and Justin Kiefer. You could say they're going to be good this year. They're going to be a disappointment. You just don't know. One team you do know about is Nate Severance. Nate's going to be there. Nate never misses the playoffs. He's the only owner to not miss the playoffs in Jerry1 Fantasy Hockey, unless you count Jack and Justin, who both made it last year, but they only been it for a year. But since as an original 6 of the Fantasy Hockey League, Nate's the only one that hasn't missed the playoffs. Nate's won a championship. There's only been 2 champions crowned, Nate and Paul, in the first 2 years. They met in the finals the first year, and then the second finals was Nate and Q. Nate beat Q. Nate was up 3 points on Justin Kiefer. He had a legit chance to get to the finals again. Very disappointed. There's probably no one more disappointed in the way how last season ended than Nate. And he plays Matt week 1. Matt's never made the playoffs. We'll see if Matt does it this year. He's made a statement in all the other leagues. He won football twice. He won the lone season fantasy college basketball. He made 2 fantasy basketball finals, and he made a fantasy baseball playoffs in the inaugural season. So we'll see if he makes a statement here in fantasy hockey. I played Jack week 1. Not much there. Not much to tell you there. I was up 30 points on Paul in the semifinals. Should have beat him, but I did get to beat him in the semifinals of fantasy football this last year. So that was nice. Nice, I say, consolation, after being so close to finally beating Paul, but I finally did do it in football. That's hats off to me. But Paul, he plays Josh week 1. Paul has just absolutely dominated Josh over the Jerry1 world. He's won 19 of the 25 meetings that the two have met. Josh just can't handle a legend like Paul. So we'll see if Josh continues, or we'll see if Paul continues his dominance over Josh in Jerry1 here in week 1. So it's gonna be interesting. But now that I have the picks listed up, like I said, Leon Draisaitl went to Paul at 1. Connor McDavid went to Josh at 2, both from Edmonton. Nathan MacKinnon, very underrated player, went 3 to Matt. Alex Ovechkin's back on Justin Kiefer's team, went 4 to him. I got Mika Zibanejad again. I got him in the 11th round last year, but this year he's a first-round talent, so got him back. My New York Rangers stud, Jack Eichel out of Buffalo, went to Q with the number 2 pick. And I will say Q's got a nice fantasy team name this year. Wheeler down Eichel Lane. He knows he's clever with the players that he's got on his team and putting them in his team name. And Austin Matthews went 7th to Jack. And then Amari Perrion, I still can't say his name. He's on the Rangers. He went big with the last pick, and he got Mitch Marner on Toronto with the first pick of the second round. So, yeah, as I pull up, just one quick second, I'm pulling up Q's team. I just we'll put a note on this his fantasy names. Like his name is Wheeler down Eichel Lane. It's his team name. So, and Patrick Lane out of Winnipeg, Blake Wheeler out of Winnipeg, and Jack Buffalo. Clever job. We'll see how you do, man. You got a chance here. I know Nate and Q. It feels like it's been so long since we've seen Nate and Q and Jerry1. It has. It's been 10 months since they played a game. So they're back on fantasy hockey stage. That's the only one they play in right now. It's for money now, so we'll see. But if I had to make some early predictions, I guess I'll make some early predictions for both leagues. But to close out fantasy hockey year, it's going to be a great year. But right now, I'm going to make my predictions for fantasy hockey. I'm going to say, and when I make these predictions, I'm never going to put me in the finals. So I'm going to try to go to the finals, but I'm going to predict the finals. That's not me. And so I'm going to say this year's fantasy hockey finals is going to be, so basically these are the 2 teams to watch out for. I think it is going to be, I'm going to make a little, I'm going to make a little playoff bracket since I'm a big bracket guy. I think the number 1 seed this year in fantasy hockey is going to be Nate. I think the number 2 seed in this year's fantasy hockey is going to be Paul. I think number 3 seed, Justin Kiefer gets a bye. Number 4 seed, I think is going to be Matt, finally gets in. And I think the number 5 seed is going to be Q. And you got to remember, this is with me not in the playoffs. So basically, Josh and Jack missed the playoffs. Anyway, I got Q getting another playoff win. He's going to play Nate, rematch in the semis. I got Nate moving on, and I got Paul moving on. And I think Paul gets it done. He proves to Nate that he's still the king. I got Paul over Nate in this year's Jerry1 Fantasy Hockey Finals. For fantasy basketball, on the other hand, it is a 16 bracket. And this year's playoffs, I am going to do, it's a week late, but number 1 seed this year is going to be Kyle. I've had a couple weeks to learn. So a little bit about how the teams are. The number 2 seed, I'm going to go out with our guest today. I think it's going to be Larry. He's got a really good team. Number 3 seed, I'm going to go with Sam. I think number 4 seed is going to be Kurt. I think number 5 seed is going to be Blake. And I think the number 6 seed is going to be in this year. And I think we got some interesting matchups. First round Clarkson University rivalry. And I got Matt with the upset. I think Sam, maybe a little bit of he doesn't have the fantasy basketball playoff win yet. Blake Kurt is actually a rematch of the fantasy baseball constellation finals, if anybody cares. And I got Kurt finally getting that first playoff win. Blake's still looking for his first playoff win. Blake and Kurt won in that constellation tournament, postseason wins, but first playoff win. Kurt and Blake still don't have one, but I got Kurt finally getting it. I got Kyle, Matt, Battle of Cousins, Battle week 4, as you've seen right now, but I got Kyle moving on. And I got to run by Kurt. I'm sorry, Larry. Thanks for coming on today, but I got to run by Kurt, getting to the finals, but I got Kyle winning it this year. There's a really good chance. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say Kyle goes 14-0. I'm going to say 13-1. Somewhere he gets a loss. I think one loss is going to come in there, and I'm going to go on a limb and say Paul beats him. Paul doesn't make the playoffs, but he beats him. That's my predictions for fantasy hockey and basketball. So that concludes the show. There's no birthday shout-outs today. None. But, I want to thank Larry for coming on. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for coming on, Larry, and best of luck on the road. I do have you getting by, but losing the semis. Oh, and there's a third-place game. You know what? Larry's going to beat Matt in the third-place game. Yep, Larry wins the third-place game. But thank you, Larry, for coming on. It's been a good show. That's episode 15 for you. I've been Nick Belize. Set your lineup. Forgot to say that last week. And that's episode 15. And we will see you. Everyone, good luck in the opening week of fantasy hockey and week 4 fantasy basketball. And we'll see you next time on the Jerry1 Fantasy Sport podcast.